All right, guys. Hi, everyone. My name's Ashley Hyman. I'm the VP of Customer Success here at Drata, and I really want to thank you for joining us for this webinar. We're really excited about our guests today. As part of the customer success team at Drata, I can tell you firsthand that we get tons and tons of customers who are daunted by security and compliance, and they want to better understand the whys behind compliance and really the best practices and the best ways to tackle compliance so that it becomes less daunting. In that spirit, we put together a wonderful panel today to learn insights, tips, best practices, and really personal experience from companies going through this compliance journey, as well as professionals within the security and compliance world. We hope to help you understand the whys behind compliance. I know for me, if I understand why I'm doing something, it becomes a lot more doable and worth pursuing in your mind. If you can understand the why, it makes sense and you continue forward. And we don't want you to do compliance just because you have to. We want you to understand the why behind it so that you can feel empowered when it comes to embarking on that journey and really taking your company to the next level. We understand that now security and compliance isn't really an option. It's how you're going to scale and continue to prosper. I will have the panelists introduce themselves in just a moment to get things started, but a couple housekeeping items. You guys have been to webinars before, but we want to be sure to answer any questions you have. So you'll see at the bottom of your screen, there's a Q&A section, and you can pop questions in there throughout the presentation. We'll circle back at the end and do our best to get through all of them. Also, if you have to come in late or leave early, we are recording this and we'll send out an email with the recording afterwards. So definitely keep an eye out for that. So without further ado, I'm going to get you introduced to the people that you really want to hear from. Let's go ahead and introduce our panelists. So first up, we have Tor. Tor is from Superside. Tor, can you tell us a little bit more about Superside and your role there?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. So my name's Tor Egil. I'm from Norway, but in English, I usually just go by Tor. I'm currently a director of engineering and the security officer at Superside, but I've been here a long time and originally came in as an engineer. Superside is a leading creative as a service solution that's kind of designed from the ground up to meet all kinds of creative needs at any scale. It's an always-on subscription-based service that's fundamentally enabled and built around a SaaS platform and uses technology to help drive and deliver high-quality creative reliably and quickly. Hundreds of customers work with Superside at this point, with companies like Google, Meta, Amazon, Shopify, Salesforce use Superside for everything. And at this point, we're now a fully remote creative company with more than 800 team members in 75 countries.
Amazing. Thank you, Tor, and thank you for being kind to me and not challenging my Midwestern accent to say your full name. I could not do it justice. So we're excited you're here and obviously excited to have you as a Drata customer as well. Next up from AWS, we have Giancarlo. Giancarlo, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you, Ashley, and thank you for this introduction. And good afternoon or good morning to everyone in the audience, and thank you for your time. So my name is Giancarlo Casella, and I lead business development and strategy for AWS Security Assurance Services. So we're a specific team within AWS Professional Services. So if you haven't worked with us before, Professional Services is the in-house consulting arm of AWS. We help customers across a series of competencies, migrations, creations of data lakes, and so on. And within that competency includes security. And so our team is a subsidiary within ProServe. And why that's important is because it allows us to give compliance advice and guidance from an in-the-cloud perspective to our customers. So our team is a QSA assessing company, a high trust assessing company. I myself am a QSA, high trust assessor, solutions architect, and so on. And so our value is that we help customers pass all sorts of audits. So I'm really excited to join this webinar and see how Drata has helped Superside.
I love it. Super helpful. And obviously we utilize AWS and many of our customers do as well. So I love the partnership here. We also have Adam Markowitz. Adam, can you tell us a little bit about Drata and your role?
Of course. Hi there, everyone. I'm Adam Markowitz, co-founder and CEO at Drata, the leading security and compliance automation platform. Company launched in 2021. In just those 2 years, though, we're very proud, right, to be working with hundreds of great partners like AWS and thousands of incredible customers like Superside, really bringing automation to the once very manual and tedious compliance process. Drata customers are able to get and stay compliant with frameworks and regulations like SOC 2, which I'm talking about today, and 13 others like ISO 27001, HIPAA, GDPR, right, et cetera. Really save hundreds, even thousands of hours every year maintaining their risk and compliance programs.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I want to dive right in, but I think it's important to know that we have folks on the line from all different perspectives with all different as far as experience with compliance. And so I want to start with the foundation. So why compliance? And I'm going to jump around to each of you. So I want to hear each of your perspective because I think it will definitely be unique. But what are some of the reasons a business would want to get started on their compliance journey? Let's start with you, Giancarlo. What do you think?
Sure. Thank you, Ashley. So I remember seeing a crazy statistic that somewhere around 2.5 quintillion bytes of data are produced by people every day. And so this data all lives on an interconnected system, the internet. And some of that data is not important, like the sports teams that you support or the music that you listen to. But a lot of the data that we produce is way more sensitive and private. So think about your credit card information, your health information, religious information, and so on. And security in a nutshell helps protect our most coveted personal information. And compliance to me is the other side of that same coin. So I like to call compliance provable security. So proof to me that you are actually securing my personal information. And I've seen startups and smaller companies actually get a competitive advantage in the market when they prioritize security and compliance. And if you think about it, would you prefer to deposit your truckloads of gold in a highly secured vault with cameras, guards, an unbreakable safe, or would you store your gold in a shed with a small padlock? And I know a funny metaphor here, but the same concept goes with data. So companies that proactively publish their compliance certifications and attestations tend to earn trust much better and faster with customers. And lastly, from conversations with many CEOs that use AWS as a service, CEOs go through a desire or require analysis around a lot of strategic initiatives. And what we're seeing in the compliance space is now starting to fall directly in line with required. So regardless of if you are in a highly regulated industry like healthcare or financial services, we're starting to see a minimum bar of security competency to even bid on any sort of work or even be onboarded as a vendor. So typically SOC 2s are commonplace in the commercial sector to show safekeeping standards, whereas things like FedRAMP, CMMC, StateRAMP is more prevalent for the federal, state, and local work. And with the latest White House executive order, we're going to start to see the importance of cybersecurity at the board level at companies. And this momentum is only going to continue, especially as cyber threats continue to grow.
And I think for us over at Superside, we come from the commercial standpoint, right? And from our experience, we got started with compliance in late 2020, early 2021, because we were starting to attract and collaborate more with larger customers. And we saw an increase in the requirements and the expectations for compliance from them. And we often ended up having to answer security questions before signing deals. And there I was engineering, and we ended up being the ones responsible for doing this. So we were very curious to kind of understand what a more structured approach to security might look like, and what processes we should adopt, and how we could introduce that into Superside to be able to answer questions in a much more confident manner. And so when we looked around at the different frameworks that existed, SOC 2 matched our requirements at a high level when we were doing initial research. And we, and still do, really appreciated the focus the framework has on implementing controls that match your company. And at this point, we were a bit lost going forward from there, right? You download the SOC 2 report. We had it's very complicated to read a 75-page document when you're trying to understand what you have to do, what are the controls, how do you actually show how you're complying with a control. And so we were interested in finding a vendor who could help us make sense of things initially. And that's kind of what ended up leading us to Drata.
I was going to jump in. I think that actually strikes a chord. I think it's going to resonate with really any company watching right now that's maybe just getting started for the first time, right? Like it was the same for myself all those years ago, and so many of our customers that come to us, they just not really knowing where to start, where to begin with controls, especially with SOC 2, right? Because it's less prescriptive than other frameworks. And so anyway, if you're watching this right now, that resonates at all, I'd just say you're in the right place. You're on the right webinar. We're going to be talking more about this.
Absolutely. And I mean, I heard from a customer yesterday that was like, wait, can we step back? What is a control? I think the group here, we use that word every day, a million times a day. Even just starting with the basics is so important. And I know on the customer success side at Drata, we really try to start there with the basics so that you're able to draw parallels and understand, even using silly analogies to help you understand what a control is compared to a requirement. So I love that viewpoint and helping everybody on this webinar to understand most people are starting there at the fundamentals. Adam, as someone who started a compliance automation company, you obviously understand the value of investing in security and compliance. But I'd love for you to share about how our prior work at Portfolio led us to the compliance automation space to begin with, and why did you decide this was an area in the market that really needed to be addressed?
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of people on the call probably aren't aware, but you actually, of course, led the customer success function at our prior company, Portfolio, in the education technology space. And that's where we felt firsthand, right, the pain of compliance. That company's product helps students earn trust with employers by really proving their skills with evidence and e-portfolios. But before we could work with any students and really sell to any university customers, we had to first earn their trust by proving we were doing the right things to protect their students' data. And that evidence lived in the SOC 2 report. So really the drive behind Drata, just like it was at the prior company, it's the importance of trust, right? Helping companies earn and keep the trust of their customers. And to us, that's what compliance is in many ways, proving you do what you say you do and what you should be doing, in this case, really to be trusted in how you store and process customer data. And to Giancarlo's point, if just the sheer amount of data being created, right? I think it's 90% of the world's data was created in just the last 2 years, which is difficult to even comprehend, but how we store, process, and protect that data, it's becoming more important every day if we're going to really increase trust across the web.
Absolutely. And again, kind of taking it back to fundamentals and the basics, the building blocks. For those that don't know much about compliance automation, Adam, can you explain what exactly it is, how it's different from the legacy approach, and why it might be beneficial?
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I mean, I'll try to kind of lay it out the older traditional way versus the new way. And since today's really about SOC 2, we could use that as an example, right? If you're not familiar with SOC 2, it's a standard that lays out a set of requirements or criteria, as they call them. And it's up to companies like ours, Superside, millions of others, really, to design and implement security controls that satisfy those criteria. Every company is different. Not all criteria might be relevant to every company, but for simplicity, we could say it's easily over 100 controls across all different function areas of your business. And then the company needs to make sure those controls are implemented and that they stay in place as the company operates day in, day out, to keep operating effectively as they were designed. And then on an annual basis, during a SOC 2 audit, independent third-party auditor comes in, and that's when the company needs to prove with evidence that these controls stayed in place. They operated effectively over the prior period, usually a 12-month period. Traditionally, this effort required hundreds or even thousands of hours of repetitive work every year, an experienced team, and then the cost, both in time and dollars, really only increased every year as the company grew. Now there's compliance automation with Drata, or companies like Superside they connect their tech stack directly to Drata. And so from their AWS to their HRIS and really everything in between to continuously monitor and automatically collect evidence of those controls every single day. And this allows for what we call continuous compliance and saving those hundreds, thousands of hours every year, but also giving the peace of mind knowing any moment throughout the year, you'll know just how compliant or how audit ready you are.
Thanks. I think that's super helpful. I always talk to customers about the fact Drata is running in the background while you continue to build your company. So, we're keeping track of did you spin up a database and forget to add backups? We would alert you of that so that you can, again, continue to scale your company, focus on what you really want to be focusing on, and Drata will let you know if something is going wrong in the background. So I love that idea there. Giancarlo, how does compliance automation align with AWS's compliance ideology for servicing their customers?
Absolutely, Ashley. So at Amazon, our decisions are governed by tenets called leadership principles. And one of our leadership principles is invent and simplify. And to this end, we've worked tirelessly to produce product-led solutions to help automate compliance and remove compliance as a barrier so that companies like Superside can focus on other strategic initiatives. And it was curious about this conversation about compliance and what a control is. And I think a good metaphor, because I have 2 young kids under 2 at my home, and so a control could be something like, hey, I want to make sure my kids are safe, right? So then a control could be for an electrical outlet, or even like knives in like a drawer or a cabinet, is putting like an actual like plastic cover or cabinet locks and so on, and ensuring that you don't necessarily have to go monitor them all the time, right? Putting like an automated control, like a plastic cover there, can really help save a lot of time. Now, just a simple metaphor for any parents there on the audience.
I like that. And if you have monitoring on it, you'll know if one of those gets knocked out at any point in time, and that'd be, a risk that would surface. So take that metaphor to the next level.
Love it, Adam.
I love it. It's a really good analogy. I know we use the bicycle helmet analogy a lot on the Drata side, and I also have a 3-year-old, and she just loves to walk around the house with her bicycle helmet on. And I'm like, well, tucked in your head, you got that control going. So I love it. I love it. Again, making things easy to understand, I think, is what's important, and how we can really connect with customers and make compliance doable, make it something that they know they can comprehend and handle. Tor, on your side, how did you and your team end up coming to compliance automation as a solution? What thought process got you to Drata?
So, like I mentioned earlier, we had very little experience going into this. It was basically me and our CTO looking around, how can we approach this in a better way? So we were fresh and looking for a partner to collaborate with that would make things simpler for us, help us understand things, but also automate as much as possible, because at that point, I think we were a 5-people tech team or something. So we really needed help to collect all of this and keep track of things, right? And that's what led us to looking into automation and what existed in that around that too. And we ended up finding Drata, which was at that point, I think, in stealth mode, and that kind of fit the bill perfectly. And we've been working together for the last 2 years now, I think.
I love it. And now that you've found compliance automation, how has that process been? Share with us your experience.
Very positive, though, of course, with the small caveat here that I've never tried to do what Adam was referencing earlier, where you, I don't know, have a bunch of spreadsheets and try to keep track of everything there. I've only ever tried to do and implement compliance in an organization with automation from the start. And we rely heavily on the integrations with AWS, who's our cloud provider, G Suite, and a bunch of others. And these all make it very easy to notice potential mistakes that happen during everyday operations, infrastructure changes, onboardings, offboardings, etc. And they also make it very easy to report on your compliance when it comes time to undergo an audit. you have track records. You can also see when things fell out of control, how long they took to fix, what you fixed. The auditors can use the platform to get information themselves, so there's less things you have to find and provide yourself. And it really helped things flow more easily.
I love it. Hopefully helped you sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that someone or something was keeping track of how you were scaling your company, because you guys have grown so quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, when we started looking into compliance, we were about 200, I think. Today, like next month, I think we'll cross 800. And the tech team has also grown from, well, 5, 6 to closer to 100. And today we use AWS, G Suite, Datadog, GitLab, and Slack among the integrations. And they're also used by different parts of the organizations of Superside to pay attention to different things, right? You have our SRE team, who obviously has responsibility for the things that are related to AWS, Datadog, GitLab. When we have new engineers join, everything is set up correctly. When we're logging things, we have control of that over in Datadog. And then on the other side, you have our people ops team, who rely on the G Suite integrations to keep track of onboardings and offboardings. Whenever someone on board, we use the Drata platform to go into, and they set up their device there, and we can prove that they've set up their device properly. So it's kind of all of these small different things for the different parts of the organizations that overall makes it a lot easier to manage for me, as trying to keep track of what's actually happening. And then I also think that another very important part of the entire relationship has been the customer success part of Drata, especially early on, but still to this day. We came into this very fresh, and we relied heavily on Ashley, who was actually our first CSM, and these days Andrew, to help us get started. We had a lot of questions, and we're kind of able to work out a lot of that with Drata and the CSM and the platform and the templates for the policies that you can adapt, and kind of that became it went from, holy shit, here's the AWS SOC 2 report on 80 pages, what do I actually do, to a more gradual, approachable focus on these things first, and then, we actually ended up getting there.
That's great. I mean, you guys were even large when you came to Drata. We've had customers that start with us that have 2 people. They're in stealth mode. And then I think it's so beneficial to start that early on, though. And again, with you guys at 200 and then going to 800, because you put the processes in place, and then they can grow with you. Where I can imagine, you're 1,000 people and you try to go back and implement, compliance checks on people's devices. It's a lot harder to tackle. So we have definitely seen where the earlier you start, it's actually easier, and people are surprised by that, because they're like, oh, we don't need
like 200 we had some rough parts at times when we had to make sure everyone had their device set up properly across, I don't know, 50 countries, I think, and 200 or 300 people there initially. So, and it's shocking, doing all the catch up can be extremely tiresome, whereas now there's a continuous process that's managed by people in people ops, right? So when they onboard, they do these things. When they offboard, we do these things, right? It's a lot easier once you have the processes in place and the expectations are there, things kind of flow along. But then the longer you wait, the likely the more painful that first step is going to be.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And I didn't even think about, you guys are across all different countries as well, like taking it to a whole next level. But I love to hear that it's, made things easier. You put in the work up front, and now it's just running on autopilot in the background. Shifting gears a little bit, the audit experience obviously is a whole nother portion of this. And I know that you all worked with Schneider Downs, which is a member of our Auditor Alliance partnership within Drata. So talk to me a little bit about what it was like working with the auditor via the platform and how that all came to be.
Overall, the audit experience has been very positive right from the start. And that's also part of why we chose SOC 2 as the framework. Like Giancarlo mentioned earlier, it's commercially focused, and you kind of, it feels at least, well, honestly, I do not have that much experience with that many other frameworks, but at least SOC 2 feels more like a collaborative effort in like, how are you implementing controls to fulfill the requirements, right? And then you adapt it and you explain it based on your organization, right? And working with Schneider Downs there has been extremely positive, and using Drata makes it, especially when you get to the actual audits. We've done 2 now. We did a type 1 last year, and then we're at the end of our type 2, and we'll receive the report for that now, hopefully in the next couple of days. And it makes the evidence collection a lot easier. They know the Drata platform, they know what they can get, where to get it. And I think if I remember correctly, almost half of the evidence we had to provide, they could go and collect automatically from Drata, which made it obviously a lot less cumbersome for us to produce the data. And it's also quite a bit of the things that they can get from Drata are things that are cumbersome to produce. So that helps a lot.
Awesome. I know, well, this is the big question, and Adam always talks about how the most valuable thing we have is our time. What do you think has been the ROI for you using compliance automation? How much time do you think you've actually saved?
Yeah, so it's hard for me to pinpoint any exact number around this, since it's been built using Drata from the ground up, and I've never tried it without compliance automation in place. But we've hired very little specifically to implement this, right? We have now 800 people in 70 countries, 100 engineers and designers, etc., who are all working in and around Superside on the platform, and we manage it with a couple of people part-time in people ops. The SRE team focuses on a few different things. I and a couple of other make sure things are running along, right? And no specific hires to do this. So there's no doubt that we've been saving at least 1,000, 2,000 hours, because likely I would have had to hire specifically for someone to manage this, and as well. And it's not just producing the evidence for a report in the end either, right? You also have the part where what's happening the rest of the year and all the things you need to stay on top of, that you need to remember to do. And you actually need to be doing things the entire year, not just producing evidence and crossing your fingers at the end of your surveillance period or the observation period. And that's something we kind of rely on a lot too, is the reporting processes and functions in Drata to make sure we're on top of things, and that we know what we need to do when anything happens. People are responsible for different parts, and we're able to do the things we are supposed to be doing and we say we are doing all year round, and not just at the very end come audit time.
That's a really good point too. I would double click on that, right? The concept of continuous compliance we've been talking about, and going from your SOC to type 1 to a type 2, where you have to prove that you stayed compliant over the prior period. I think that gets lost on a lot of companies, perhaps kind of doing this for the first time, where these audits happen every year, and they're clearly not something you could just cram for the last minute. You have to prove you stayed compliant during the prior 12-month period. So every day, every week, employees are joining or departing, and you're spinning up new AWS resources, right? Like adding new tools. There's literally every day is an opportunity for these gaps to form in your security compliance posture. So this concept of continuous compliance, like having automation in place, allows you to sleep a little better at night, knowing you're going to be alerted in real time, right? If a gap forms, because no matter how big your team gets, you can never manually monitor hundreds of controls every single day. Automation is really key to continuous compliance here.
Absolutely. Giancarlo, how does compliance automation really complement AWS and your focus on security and compliance?
Yeah, so I think there are two different perspectives to this question. So if you're familiar with cloud computing, you will know the concept of the shared responsibility model. So essentially what that means is that there are some things from a security and compliance perspective that will be solely the responsibility of AWS, and some that will be solely the responsibility of the customer. A lot of times, though, there is a shared responsibility based on the service being used and the use case. And from an of the cloud perspective, here at AWS, we have a substantial worldwide audit team whose job and responsibility is to ensure that our infrastructure, our services, and so on conform with global regulations. And they ensure that we meet and exceed the bar for risk management frameworks and other security standards. As such, if you are familiar with AWS, you can actually navigate onto the console and search Artifact for our service, where you will see a lot of our different audits from SOC 2s, PCI, High Trust, FedRAMP, and more. So our worldwide audits team gives customers the assurance that they can move their most regulated and secure workloads onto AWS. Now, from an in the cloud perspective, frankly, this is where my team comes into play. So my team, AWS Security Assurance Services, is that wholly owned subsidiary of AWS, where we're able to provide compliance, advice, and guidance to customers. And as I mentioned earlier in the introduction, we help customers pass audits. So we bring our industry expertise and our deep technical knowledge of AWS to help customers accelerate their path towards compliance. And I think companies like Drata offer tremendous value. So compliance, as Adam was mentioning, is not a one and done endeavor. To maintain these certifications and attestations, companies are going to need to attest and go through yearly audits. And this overhead can be very cumbersome to engineering teams. Whereas instead of focusing on customer features, their time is spent generating evidence of compliance. So Drata comes in and helps create a single plane view into the current state of a compliance program. And if there are any deviations, Drata will alert and also can even remediate.
I mean, thinking ahead and in the future with AWS, does AWS plan to further integrate any compliance automation into the services? How do you see the market changing with compliance automation in play?
Absolutely. So I mentioned before about tenets that govern Amazon, and another leadership principle is customer obsession. So we actively work with customers, we listen to feedback and innovate alongside them to create uniquely Amazonian products that help make customers' job easier. And to that end, AWS hosts several conferences each year where we showcase the latest features from AWS, including Audit Manager, Guard Duty, Security Hub. As an example, we announced at reInvent last year that Amazon Inspector now scans AWS Lambda functions for vulnerabilities, and automated data discovery, a new feature of Amazon Macie, now gains visibility into where your sensitive data resides on Amazon Simple Storage Service. So there's a ton of innovation happening at AWS and more to come.
I love it. We'll continue to watch and see all the innovation there. I know our teams are working closely together to collaborate, but I think another reason we all work so well together is your focus on customer obsession. I know from day one at Drata, that's been most important. Every meeting we have is focused on customers, quotes from customers, hearing directly from them. It's really one of the main pillars of our business. And so, Adam, on that note, where do you see compliance automation heading? What's on the roadmap? What exciting things do you want to share? And especially in relation to AWS?
Sure. Well, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, right, if 90% of the world's data was created in the last 2 years, I think how we store, process, and really secure that data on a continuous basis it's most important. I mean, I'm emphasizing continuous basis. I do believe the future of compliance is one where we're only ever talking about continuous compliance. And then compliance is really just, I mean, it's one piece of an important puzzle. We talk about GRC, governance, risk, and compliance, or integrated risk management, IRM. I mean, at the end of the day, really, like everything starts and ends with risk, right? Drata released a robust risk management solution last year, and we're going to be further enhancing its capabilities this year, really expanding into third-party risk automation, using this unique automation first approach of ours to deliver on our mission, our vision of being the trust layer between our incredible customers like Superside and then those they do business with. That's the future.
Absolutely. Tor, I know it's crazy. Everywhere I turn lately, I'm hearing about Superside and people working with Superside. It seems like you guys are all over the place right now. What's on your roadmap, and especially when it comes to security and compliance program? Are you thinking about pursuing any other frameworks?
Yeah, so the road there was quite obvious initially, right? Like going straight to a type 2 seemed quite daunting. So we initially went to a type 1, and now we've undergone and completed our SOC 2 type 2 audit. And we were actually thinking, like, where do we go from here? What more do we want to do, right? Like, we will do another SOC 2 type 2 audit, as we will continue to do for the foreseeable future, I imagine, every single year as part of our continuous compliance. But in 2023, we're also expanding a bit more into looking at how Drata can help us document and structure our GDPR compliance, what automations might help us there. And the idea is to use that and undergo a maturity assessment towards the latter parts of 2023.
I like that you emphasized you'll continue to do your SOC 2 type 2. I think there's this misconception that, oh, I checked it off, I'm done, and now I can move on. But this is actually something you have to maintain. Again, even more value with continuous monitoring, because I could only imagine you do all this work to prepare for your audit, say outside of a tool like Drata, you get done with it, next year comes and you have to start all over in your spreadsheets, where Drata is going to keep monitoring. So your next type 2 is going to be even easier than this one probably was. So I love that you point that out. I'm not done with SOC 2, but we're going to continue to build upon what we've done. I was
going to jump in and just say that's another good point of, if you start with SOC 2, or really wherever you start, typically there's going to be other frameworks outside of that you ultimately want to comply with or be certified against. And a lot of the same work that you've already done for your SOC 2, let's say, those controls are going to overlap. They're going to also satisfy requirements across other frameworks. And so once you get going, you're never starting from scratch again, as long as you have the continuous compliance in motion.
Well, the moment of truth, Tor, I think anytime you're building a business or building a product, there's always going to be things that you wish you did differently. And so if you had to have done something differently when you got started in compliance, what would it have been? Or, I mean, to put it a little bit differently, what words of wisdom would you want to share with others who are just getting started?
I think the main one is to get going. Things are a lot smoother once you've started than they seem initially. We waited a while, and that led to one having to answer a lot of questions where you're like, I mean, we kind of do this, right? Like, me and the other 3 engineers know that we do this, but and then some others of like, what are they actually asking here? I'm not quite sure. I think we do this, but you're kind of guessing a bit. And we also, like, it was quite a bit of catch up with 250 people or something that we had to get compliant, right? And today we're way more confident in our overall security posture, and we've learned a ton by working with our partners, and it's something I also actively try to push back into and make available for our sales reps, etc. Right? Like, we are compliant, we are doing these things. You can provide this when you have questions with your customers, etc. And it really helps build trust early on. And you also don't need to know everything in the beginning. Find strong partners and to rely on and utilize their expertise to learn and make adaptations that kind of fit you and your business and your context. And in the end, it's much easier to stay compliant than it is to become compliant. So I would have started and pushed for this quite a bit earlier when I joined Superside if we went back in time. And I think a lot of things would have been smoother then. And it might seem a bit daunting at first, and to some extent, like it can be too. But it's definitely worth it. And I think we see quite a bit of return in terms of our conversations and our ability to connect this with the conversations we're having with our customers and being able to prove that we are doing. And that's also something, for example, it's not just like, hey, here's our SOC 2 report, right? We also show them, here are all the things we do to get us to this point, right? And that we take care of to make sure that your data is safe when you use Superside. And I feel like that really helps set the tone for a lot of the sales reps.
That's another good point, right? Like when you get your SOC 2 report, first thing you're going to do usually is share that report with your customers or your respective customers. And so it's not a certification where it's, a pass fail. I mean, Superside does this, but any company that's going through this, it's making sure that you have a good report, one you're proud to put in front of your customers and prospects and speak to, because they're going to look at it. That's the whole point of the report itself.
Yeah, absolutely. And we also try to break, like, we can provide the report, but we also try to break it down a bit, right? Like looking at a report can be quite daunting. So we also make it like we make the different parts available to customers in different ways, but in ways that are like understandable depending on who you're speaking to.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, you're really building a culture of security and compliance across your company. And I always think about, I've been on both the sales and the CS side at other companies. And I remember getting security questionnaires from like a prospect or a customer and being so anxious, like, do we do this? I don't know. And I think with Drata, like it can also build confidence across your company. We're doing something about this. When I get a questionnaire, we have answers. Someone has guided us to ensure we're doing the right thing. So I also think it just builds confidence across the org, even beyond engineering, which I think can be a game changer for your sales team, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. Adam, any advice you would share beyond what Tor had?
I think Tor's advice is spot on. I agree with all of it. I'd double click on certain areas. I think. I mean, first, I'd emphasize, well, I guess my own personal belief that time and trust are our most important assets, and security compliance impacts both. So, if you're getting started as a company, it's truly never too early to start. The earlier you do, the cheaper, faster, and easier it is to maintain. I think that's been a common theme we've heard from everybody here today, right? And then also remembering that it's not a check the box activity, as Giancarlo said, right? This is a continuous habit, like brushing your teeth. So if you take advantage of automation, you could have it baked right into your company's culture as early as possible. And then just like any other habit, you don't think about it. It's there from the beginning. There's less kind of inertia to have to change later. Truly never too early to start.
Absolutely. Giancarlo, I'm sure AWS customers, see you as someone they come to ask questions and to gain advice and really to just guide them. When you're talking to AWS customers, what do you recommend to them as far as structuring their security and compliance practice?
Sure. So first, I really think that the right mindset is needed. And you need to understand that there will be an investment needed to do this right. But if done right, it will pay off in the long run. So my recommendation is to appoint folks that are deeply knowledgeable on AWS services and also in the compliance space. Here, they're going to be able to dive into the shared responsibility model to start accelerating the path towards compliance. As much as possible, I also recommend that there should be a top-down approach to security and compliance. It should trickle down all the way into the engineering DevOps practices, where code that is being pushed that end up making an application and customer-facing workloads already have those preventative and detective controls ingrained. And remember, it's absolutely fine to ask for help from others like AWS Security Assurance Services and Drata to frankly make things a lot easier.
All right, well, I'll stop throwing out questions, but we have questions from folks that are on the line now and questions that some people submitted in advance. So I'm going to put them out there and you guys can fight over who wants to take the lead in answering them. But I think this is a good place to start. There's a attendee who is preparing for their first SOC 2 audit. They want to understand, and Tor, actually, you might be the best one here, how much internal time should they expect to spend before the audit actually starts?
It probably depends a lot on company size, I imagine.
True.
For us, it was quite, I spent quite a lot of time but that was also because I was the one who took responsibility for the entire thing, and kind of we had to figure out what we were doing. We had to get everyone compliant. We had to develop policies. We had to make sure we were actually adhering to those policies, etc. So going from zero knowledge to actually passing 2 audits does take some time and requiring quite a bit of knowledge. But you also see the changes that it makes in the organization as you develop these things, as you actually start to comply with them and you follow up on them, and the positive impacts that it has. So I would definitely expect to spend some time on it, even with compliance in place. But so far, from my perspective, that time has been very well spent, I guess you could say.
I could kind of
Without
double click.
having a hard number there, I guess.
No, I think it's a tough question to answer, Tor, because like you said, it depends on a lot of variables. One, and probably one of the biggest, is the size of the company. Now with thousands of use cases, I guess, under our belt, and some benchmarks, like we've seen, again, companies doing this for the first time. A company under 10 employees doing a SOC 2 Type 1, which is really important nuance there, right? A Type 1 is a point in time audit that you can just do in a short time. We've had companies less than 10 employees do it as quickly as 2 weeks, right? Dedicating the time to go do what needs to be done to prepare and then have that audit done. If we're talking about a SOC 2 Type 2, though, it's really important to note that a Type 2 audit is where you're proving the operating effectiveness of your controls over a period of time. And usually that's no shorter than a 3-month time period, where you could do all the same work getting ready, but now that you're ready, you're going to want to wait 3 months, keeping everything operating effectively, and then get audited for that prior 3-month period. So that's usually as fast as you want to go. Anything shorter than a 3-month period isn't as strong of a SOC 2 Type 2 report. On an ongoing basis, these are done annually, every 12 months. But again, if you're just trying to go as quickly as you can, those are some kind of benchmarks you could think of.
That's super helpful for people to understand the timelines there. What pitfalls, Giancarlo and Adam, have you seen folks make that could be avoided when they're completing readiness or SOC assessments?
You want to go first there, Giancarlo?
Sure. I think some of the pitfalls are not having executive leadership sponsorship. Like I mentioned earlier, the whole trickle down effect is very important in terms of the signal that leadership is giving into the program. Because frankly, if leadership doesn't really mandate or embed a culture of security and compliance, then you can't really expect your engineering or control owners or control performers to follow suit, right? So I think having a strong leader that is able to distill the importance and also translate that to especially like an engineering side and also a business side, i.e. like on the engineering side, it'll make your lives easier. You're not going to have to spend so much time generating evidence. And on the business side, hey, all these certifications can actually open up additional revenue channels. But having a strong leader communicating the benefits of that is super important, and something that unfortunately I haven't seen too much. But I think now that we're entering this new world where cybersecurity is now at the board level, it's going to be hopefully more prevalent.
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely top of the list, what I was going to say, executive buy-in. And that's why we spend so much time with our customers, even our prospective customers, kind of educating the market with content, and even much of what we spoke about today is just about the why behind it, getting folks bought into why they're doing it. Of course, there's monetary, there's business reasons to do it. These are typically revenue gating kind of certifications. That might be the initial kind of onus and push and drive behind it, but on an ongoing basis, right? A continuous buy-in to the importance of why we're doing this in the first place. It has to be there in order for it to really get into the culture and become habitual.
Absolutely. Got one from our Q&A right now. We have someone attending who's been evaluating Drata for a month now. First off, excited to work with you in the future. We can't wait for you to get started. But Adam, they have been looking at localization. It's become a factor for them as they're planning to have some data on-prem, some on the cloud, and they want to understand how we support both. And will they be able to utilize Drata for on-prem private cloud and public cloud data?
Sure. I mean, short answer is yes, right? We have many customers that are kind of hybrid environments, multi-cloud, some on-prem, some moving to the cloud in transition. The good news is obviously anything that's in the public cloud we connect to today right away, get going. As that more and more is moved to the cloud, we're right there. And again, things are already in motion and going through the same process. So adding more doesn't really change much, just adds more time savings. For anything on-prem, we have our open API that allows our customers to do their own continuous monitoring internally and then automatically push evidence into Drata. So that Drata still is the main dashboard, the single pane of glass for viewing all of your controls, the audit readiness across any framework that you're ultimately complying with. So long answer, but short answer is yes.
Awesome. Yeah, and as you're going through that evaluation process, obviously the sales rep that you're working with probably has brought in one of our sales engineers who's fantastic and can help provide even more clarity there. But don't be shy if you want to get more details to reach out to us more after this. Adam, this is another one for you. Does Drata have any plans to vertically integrate into the audit space?
Like conduct audits, I'm guessing ours is the question. So no, right? Drata, we partner with, we have our Auditor Alliance network, over 50 different audit firms that way we work with. We take an agnostic approach and really want to maintain that independence, right? When you get your SOC 2 report, one of the things that gives this report the weight that it carries in the market is the fact that it's an independent third-party auditor that's conducting the audit and generating the report. And so from a strategic standpoint, Drata's made the decision to actually partner with auditors, build products that actually help auditors, conduct more audits faster with even an increased bar of integrity because of the continuous monitoring nature that Drata provides. So there's an actual auditor interface in Drata that allows them to come in and conduct audits sometimes 90% or 90% faster than they used to. We have case studies where our customers have spent 90% less time during the actual audit engagement itself than they did prior without. So it's that's the approach that we take, and it's worked very well for us.
Yeah, and I would also add on the customer success team that I oversee, we actually have an audit partner management team as well. So when you're using Drata, say you work with an auditor we've never worked with before, they'll actually train them, get them up to speed, ensure that they feel comfortable in the platform and even answer questions during the audit. So you don't have to be that in between. And I think that's huge. And part of that, getting feedback from auditors, our partners and non-partners, we're actually releasing our new audit hub next week. That's basically all built on feedback from auditors about, well, we love this, but we'd love you to do this as well. So we're constantly taking feedback. I think we talked about being customer obsessive earlier. We include the auditors in that because we know if you aren't successful in your audit or you have a challenging audit, like that's not success for you as the customer. So,
and I would just add one more thing on that. From the very beginning, as soon as we built products for the auditors, we wanted to make sure that the auditor experience is very different than our end user, our customer experience, right? When you're using Drata to continuously monitor your controls every single day across multiple frameworks, like when you invite an auditor into a system like that, it's important that you're inviting them into a specific instance, that it's controlled, and from both sides, the auditors told us this is exactly what they would want. It's not like as an auditor, I wouldn't want to log in and see exactly what an admin on this customer would see within Drata. So there's a separate interface, and you as a customer working with your auditor actually control what level of access and for how long, and during the actual audit period. Everything is very well orchestrated for that regard.
absolutely. That's super helpful. Tor, I know you mentioned you used to get those security questionnaires, and I feel like everybody on the line probably gets those security questionnaires. Have you felt like getting your SOC 2 has reduced the burden or effort for those security surveys that you are receiving from prospects and customers?
Yeah, drastically. We're way more confident in our answers at this point, I'd say. Also see slightly, or depends a bit, volume is higher, but the percentage per customer might be a bit lower too, because you can also point to having been SOC 2 audited, etc., which sometimes makes it so you don't have to answer anything. But then when you are answering things, you have way more coat hangers, so to say, to hang the questions that they're asking onto, because that's usually parts that are related to things you were doing for your SOC 2 or in and around the new organization. So it's helped a lot and made things a lot smoother.
Awesome. Giancarlo, question for you. If someone's using AWS, using Macy, your trusted advisor services, and Inspector, what's the value that they might see in adding something like Drata on top of that? Obviously this person's feeling really good about what they've built up with you on the AWS side. How can Drata supplement that?
Yeah, I think Drata complements and also supplements a lot of those different services that you mentioned, Ashley. And I think, and being very frank about it, I think AWS services continuously grow. And I do think that even with using things like guard duty and config and even Macy, it won't necessarily alone get you to where you need to be. You do need to invest some time to ensure that there is a governance structure in place. And ultimately, once you do go in and get that SOC 2 certification, having that ongoing cadence to maintain to ensure that when you are due for your next audit and certification, you don't have any surprises. And I think that's like the perfect place for Drata to fit in, so that there are no surprises during the course of the downtime, if you will. You'll be alerted via like a traffic light single pane of glass view that shows, hey, your controls are doing what they're supposed to be doing. Great. Hey, red, no. Hey, you should go and double click into this. There are certain things that can be remediated by a click of a button, but some of them will have to require some additional oversight. But at the very least, there should be no surprises. And ultimately, what that ends up doing is when you go through your audit, it just speeds up that process so that it's more of a formality at that point.
I love it. Adam, what were we talking about the other day? I think it was surprises are just for birthdays. We don't want surprises in audits or any other place, just for birthdays. I think we're going to go through one more question, because I think this one is maybe something people worry about. And so I'd love to get that worry out of the way. Adam, in the auditor view in Drata, does the auditor have access to everything? Can they see everything? There might be some concerns. You're not going to be perfect every single day.
Short answer is no, right? So like we said earlier, you are provisioning a level of access for your auditor when you invite them in to Drata. And that's exactly not just what our customers wanted, but of course what the auditors themselves wanted. There is the value of continuous monitoring for the company, allowing you to basically, like as Giancarlo said earlier, like provable security. As soon as you put continuous monitoring on a control, you are doing security monitoring. You're no longer just checking a box for a compliance audit. So that allows you as a company, as Tor talked about earlier, sleep better at night, knowing that if and when an issue arises, you'll be able to jump on it quickly because you're going to be alerted in real time. That's music to an auditor's ears, right? The idea that you are continuously doing this throughout the year, how frankly it should be, and how the industry has talked about it for almost a decade. So very long-winded answer again to the question of no, you're provisioning a certain level of access, time, and visibility for your auditor.
Amazing. Well, we are right at the end of our time. I want to thank everybody so much for joining us today. I hope that you're walking away feeling empowered and more confident in your decision to move forward with automation or to simply explore compliance. It is something you can do, and that's what we want to make clear here. Obviously, thank you, Tor, Giancarlo, Adam, for joining us and sharing your experience and your expertise. We are going to send a 1-minute survey that we're hoping you can fill out after this, just to give us feedback. We always say good and bad feedback. We want it all. It's super important in how we grow. So send that over. We appreciate you taking the time, and we will hopefully see you soon. Thank you, everybody.